Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls from around the world, welcome back to another episode of In the Huddle EP 187. Man, oh man, we in the barbershops, we in the parking lots, the popping mama shops, and we going non-stop. Welcome back to another episode, y'all. 1833 Radio BX is the request line here on Can You Dig Sports Radio. Call us up, let me know how you feel, and if you're trying to hang out with the real Lil here on the show. Obviously, we got a lot to discuss. We had a great show yesterday. And, man, it's time to recap this Monday Night Football matchup from last night. But I just want to note here that Zach is out, Zay is out, so I'm rocking solo today. But actually, I'm not rocking solo because I do have a guest in the building that goes by the name of Blake Lewis Jr., who covers the Washington football team and is here to hang out with me here on the show. Blake Lewis Jr., how you doing, my guy?
Hey, what's going on, my friend? I appreciate you having me back on.
Yes, sir. I had this guy on a couple times on the show. I always love his insight, so I'm glad to have him on at this time, especially when the Washington football team outlasts the Seattle Seahawks last night and moves into the 7th seed in the NFC playoff picture. Wow. It's getting spooky, y'all, in the NFL. The NFL is so wide open. The NFC is stacked. The AFC, I can't tell you from a can of paint who is declared number one team in the AFC. I may say Patriots today. I may say the Bengals tomorrow. I may say the Ravens next week. I don't know. It's been that type of season. But, man, let's get right to it about the game last night. Washington's time of possession, 41 minutes. And Seattle's time of possession, 18 minutes. You tell me that stat alone, I will predict that the Washington football team won that game. And they damn sure did. So, Blake Lewis Jr., I want to start us off here. We all know the Washington football team this season has had a rep for long, sustainable drives, including a 19-yard play drive that lasted 10-plus minutes against my Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm a Brady fan. To seal the deal. The football team was able to control the game last night, rushing the rock with Gibson, who ran 29 times for 111 yards. J.D. McKissick also did his thing. Is controlling the clock, sustainable for this team, and can this style of offense carry this team on a late season run?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that what they're doing is they've made a conscious effort to run the football. And anytime you can get contributions in the run game, it's going to open up your passing game. And therefore, it's going to limit the amount of turnovers you have in the air, too. So I think that's been a big plus for them because, early in the season, Taylor Heineke was turning the football over. And I think because they were putting a little bit too much on his plate and expecting for him to win games without being himself, on top of that. So now that they're running the football, Antonio Gibson's getting more touches, looks better. J.D. McKissick, hopefully he'll be okay. It looked like he had more of a head injury yesterday. And then, of course, Jared Patterson, the rookie from Buffalo. So, you have all three of these guys that are capable at any time of getting good carries, but Antonio Gibson's the bell cow, for this team. And as he goes, I think the offense goes and it becomes less predictable, when they can run the football. So when you run the football, you're going to have long drives. How many times did we see last night, 3rd and 2s or 3rd and 3s? Those are manageable plays to get those yards to extend drives. And right now, this offense, quiet as kept, is clicking. They're able to move the ball pretty much on any defense we've seen. And this goes back even in the losses they had to Green Bay and to Denver. Those are two really good defenses, by the way, and they were still moving the football. So, yeah, to answer your question, my friend, I definitely think that this is a sustainable type of offense, and they're going to need it if they're going to try to sneak into the playoffs.
Absolutely. It was a solid performance from Washington's defense as Landon Collins led with 7 tackles and a forced fumble. Cameron Curl, he continues his breakout season as this versatile defender who can match up in man-to-man drop-back coverage, whether it's rush the quarterback, make tackles. His play has caused Jack Del Rio to have this 3-safety scheme, which I believe is the reason for their turnaround and success at the defensive side of the ball as of late. Can you attest the turnaround of this team defensively and what you see from Cameron Curl and what is he doing off and on the football field that has impacted his play on the football field thus far?
Well, I mean, I think the key thing is that we saw what he did last year as a rookie. He had a really outstanding rookie season, and it had a lot of us in the media, had fans alike. It had a lot of people excited about, his future. How good could this kid be? Obviously, we know that was because Landon Collins was injured, and that kind of thrust Cam Curl into, the forefront where he excelled. I didn't like the two, safety scheme that they were running with him and Landon, early in the year, because Landon Collins is not a cover guy. He's never been a cover guy. He's a guy that plays close to the line, close to the box. And as Ron Rivera said to us yesterday after the game, he said, and quote me on this now, he said that we can call Landon a down, basically a downfield, linebacker or safety, whatever you want to call him. But he said now we can call him a downfield safety. Well, I think what happens with all of that stuff is that when you put two guys that kind of play similar in nature in the same positions, they're not going to do well. So I think with Bobby McCain was the wild card here. You put Bobby McCain in free safety, you put Cam Curl a strong safety where he naturally can play and cover tight ends and be close to the box as well. And then you have Landon Collins, who now can be closer to the line of scrimmage and do what he was doing while he was with the Giants in New York. I just think it frees up all three of those players' games, and more importantly, it keeps all three of them on the field, so you don't have any dissension as far as playing time, minutes, anything like that. And by them doing that, it's almost shored up their secondary. I mean, yeah, they had the big touchdown play yesterday that they gave up. They gave up two long plays yesterday. But outside of that, I thought that, they've continued to play well. The corners are playing well on top of that. Danny Johnson's a guy that's been excelling over the past few weeks. So I think by Jack Del Rio making that move, which is kind of unconventional, you normally don't see three safeties, in anyone's, defense. You see more nickel guys, corners, things like that. I think it's ingenious, and I like it, and it's working for them.
Absolutely. And you talked about the big play, one of the big plays that happened at the end of the game. I want to take you back to that last sequence at the end of the game, or should I say the last sequences, right before the last play or the last drive. Obviously, there was a 4th and goal. The kicker was injured, I believe, so they went for it on 4th and goal. Logan Thomas, it looked like he caught a touchdown. They called it a touchdown on the field. It was overturned. I'm not sure if there was conclusive evidence to overturn the call, but they did. It allowed Russell Wilson to have that final drive. We all know he's missed the 4th quarter, and he, it wasn't moving at one point. It was nothing happening. They was getting stopped out of nowhere. Swain was wide open for the touchdown, and then obviously the 2-point conversion after, which I thought when I looked at the play, I thought if he was on time with the throw, he could have made that throw. I thought he could have fit it in there if he was on time, but he saw him a little late. He tried to fit it in there. It was picked off. You also had DK Metcalf that was actually looking like he was going to stream open at the corner of the end zone. That's a whole nother topic that I'll probably get to later. But can you take me back to what you saw during those last sequences, especially the final drive?
Well, one thing that I'm not a big fan of, and I'll be the first to say it right here, I'm not a fan of corners playing 10 yards off at any point in the game, even if it's a prevent defense, you want to call it. I don't like prevent defenses. I think prevent defenses prevent you from winning, and they prevent you from continuing to do what you were doing. And as you just said yourself, you alluded to the fact that Seattle had nothing coming for most of the game. Well, now those final sequences, they actually played off their receivers. They weren't pressing as much as they were earlier in the game. And, it gave Seattle some life. It gave their receivers room to get off the ball. And remember, Seattle has some large receivers. I mean, DK Metcalf's one of the largest receivers in the NFL. So if you're going to give him room to run and be able to, not have to fight off the line of scrimmage, they're going to beat you that way. So I just think that maybe was a bad tactic at that specific time, and it gave them a chance to score and get the 2-point conversion. And when that happened, it did take this, a little bit of the air out the crowd. I know in the press box, it was like we just saw this team dominating this team, pretty much for 56, 57 minutes. Time of possession on offense was 41 minutes. They had the ball to 19 for Seattle. So you see this stuff and you just think, this should have been an easy game. Unfortunately, you had the injury to Joey Sly, which impacted how they, finished the game, because let's face it, they could have easily kicked the field goal and gone up by 13 points at that point. The game would have been over by all intents and purposes, but they couldn't do that. So I just think, that defensive sequence, poorly played, gave Seattle life, but ultimately, we know the outcome. Washington still won the game.
Absolutely. And both Logan Thomas and Curtis Samuel was both activated from IR. We all know what both of these brothers bring. I'll start off with Logan Thomas, being that big guy, almost like a receiver, tight end, catching the football, hard to guard, one-on-one, a red zone threat, obviously. I'm not too worried about his impact and what he could bring to the team immediately. He had some targets yesterday. In yesterday's game, I'm pretty sure Taylor Heineke, that would be his safety net. But a guy like Curtis Samuel, who was on the pitch count last night, I'm a little bit, how can I say, curious about his impact, because we all knew prior to going into the season that was a guy that was supposed to be one of the prize free agent pickups because of his versatility. He's very explosive. He can do it all. He's your third down guy. He could, be lined up at running back. He could be a wide receiver out in motion. Whatever it is you need him to do, he can do it. But obviously on the pitch count last night, had that nagging injury. Should we temper our expectations for the rest of the season with a guy like Curtis Samuel?
Well, I think anytime he's on the field, whether he's 100% or not, you still have to respect his speed. You still have to respect his versatility. You have to respect his body of work over his career. He's a dangerous weapon when he's on the field. So if you're a D-back, if you're a defensive coordinator, you don't know, so to speak, how healthy the guy is. I mean, you just don't know. So you can't risk, saying, well, we're going to play off him 10, 15 yards, or, we're going to press him and don't worry about, any coverage up top because of his great speed. So I just think that anytime he's on the field, he's kind of like a decoy. It's no coincidence that before last night, Terry McLaurin's best game came as, when he was out there on the field. Curtis Samuel was on the field, didn't play a lot, but he still was out there, and, the opposing team had to account for him at all times. I think last night, one of the things that stood out to me was he took a big hit early, on one of his catches. I mean, he got drilled, and he bounced back up. That's a good sign. That's kind of like one of those, maybe you need to get hit and get the cobwebs knocked out of you despite your injury. Maybe that's something that needed to happen. And, so he played. Ron Rivera kind of alluded to us at practice this week that, maybe, he could be a decoy out there for right now. But they've got him out there. They're expecting him to continue to play. And if he can come back and play against the Raiders on Sunday, that's going to be a big coup for them because again, it gives you another weapon that defenses have to account for.
And that's what happens when you have a versatile player with speed. And Curtis Samuel is that even when his impact don't show up on a stat sheet, it will show up on the football field, because you have to account for where he is on the football field. So yeah, I 100% agree with that. Well, looking into Ron Rivera, I seen the video in the chat that I'm in on Instagram with my boys of In the Huddle, and Zach, my co-host, he posted a video of Ron Rivera after the game, and the brother was fired up. All right, the brother looked like he was ready to go out there and play some football his damn self. Can you talk about what Ron Rivera has meant to this team? Just him as a coach. He obviously don't get the same love that Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay or Bill Belichick or Andy Reid, Sean Payton gets, etc. John Harbaugh even. Can you attest to his presence there, coaching this team and coaching this locker room and the environment that he continues to sustain over there in Washington?
It's interesting. Has Ron done some things that kind of had us scratching our head a little bit? Sure he has. I mean, the Curtis Samuel thing is one that had us scratching our head. Perhaps Ron might win on this, make us look bad. And I'm sure he wants nothing more than to do that, playfully now. But yeah, I just think that his professionalism, his demeanor is never give up, never quit. His personal thing that he was dealing with as far as cancer, and just battling through that, still coming out coaching. I'm witnessing that firsthand, seeing him do that, over the last 2 years, last year more specifically. That says a lot to players that you're coaching. It's, you're just playing football. This man's battling for his life, and if he can do that and still come out here and coach you, you can give 100% effort. So there's never been a question of this team's effort and desire. Even when they were losing games, they still competed, and you just never saw them lay down. Maybe the performance wasn't up to par, but at the end of the day, the effort was always there. I also think that when you look at this team overall, they're a gritty football team. You are what your coach is. You take on the personality of that coach. And this is just a scrappy team that fights you, scratches and claws. It doesn't look pretty at times. Let's call it like it is. But I'd rather take ugly wins than pretty losses, and that's what they're doing. So that falls back on Ron Rivera. I can say this, my friend, in practice, they're just so regimented, how they go about stuff. They don't walk in between drills. They run to their group drills. The helmets are even laid down, not just thrown down on the ground. They're laid down in perfect unison. And those are little things that come back into the details of a game, during those 60 minutes where you need guys to communicate and be on the same page. And John Allen has told us this over the past few weeks. He even said it again last night after the game at the podium. He was like, he knows how they were practicing. Ron Rivera said the same thing. They practiced hard. They practiced well. They had good practices. It just wasn't translating on Sundays. Well, now it's translating, and you can see that they're not killing themselves. You don't see the stupid penalties and offsides here, offsides there. There were a couple questionable holding calls last night. I will say that Brandon Scherf did not hold Jamal Adams. He just threw him to the ground. That's a whole nother subject. But yeah, to answer your question, all this goes back to Ron Rivera and his professionalism.
The Cowboys lost 3 out of their last 4 games. The Washington football team has won 3 straight. 2 games back of the Cowboys right now in the loss column. So my next question that I will present to you is, do you eventually see the Washington football team, who I believe still got to play them twice, if I'm not mistaken? I don't think they played at all this year. Do you think they eventually will catch up to the Cowboys and possibly steal this division at the end?
I mean, it's possible. I mean, it really is. I know it seemed crazy to say something like that, but as of today, they're playing the best of any team in the NFC East. If you had asked me this question 2-3 weeks ago, I would have said no, because the Cowboys looked like they were going to get better and better and better. But one thing I've always told my Cowboy friends out there, I've always seen you guys get out the gate strong. This happens yearly. It's like a horse at a race. They get out, they get a lead, and it looks good, but they fade down the stretch. And we're seeing the same exact story now. It's not done yet. Perhaps they can recover and still win the division. I still think that I'm leaning towards them winning the division. But I tell you what, and I keep saying this each week, and it's happening. If Washington can win, it can get interesting. If they can win this week, it'll get interesting. Well, if they beat the Raiders on Sunday, it might be on. I mean, it legitimately might be on, because now you're talking 4 wins in a row and all your NFC East games coming up. You already got 1 dub against the Giants, in week 2, which looks really good at this point. But you have Dallas twice, and you have a game, 2 games against the Eagles that look winnable, and then you have a game against the Giants, even though it's up in New York, it still looks winnable. I'm not saying this team's going to run the table and reel off, what would that be, 9 in a row if they were to do that? I don't see that happening. But I definitely can see them winning 7 out of those 9 games, and if that happens, I would venture to say that's winning the division, because that means you got some dubs on the Cowboys, which closed the gap.
Yeah, and I remember going on Instagram, and this was before the Tampa Bay game, and I seen your video, and you were saying, is this a must-win for the Washington football team? And you said every game is a must-win game for the Washington football team. I guess they must have saw your video too, because they won 3 straight. So I have to say, Lake Stradamus on the mic.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Lake Stradamus. Hopefully they did. I just like I said, I just know that they've been working hard, man. And they've had their fair share of injuries, and they're still coming up big. The offensive line has been besieged by injuries all year, and yet each guy that steps in, Wes Sweeter went out, last night. Somebody else comes in. Tyler Larson was out. Somebody comes in. Keith Ishmael comes in yesterday and plays well, so well that after the game he took a knee on the field and prayed. Just, you could tell it was one of those moments like, man, I did it. I played at an NFL level extremely high in a meaningful football game. So they keep plugging away. And again, that's a testament to the coaching staff and to those young guys in the locker room that believe that, they never lost confidence in themselves, even though we did in the media, even though the fans did. They kept saying it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And now it seems like it's here.
I want to transfer to the opposing side here and talk about Seattle, because there's some predictions that I made prior to this season in the preseason that was spot on. Some of them were off a little bit. I was a little bit too high on the Denver Broncos this year because I fell in love with their roster, but they're not quite there yet. One of the things that I pinpointed on and I was able to accurately time was the demise of Seattle. Throughout the preseason, I said Seattle would not make the playoffs this year. A lot of people looked at me like I had horns sticking out my head. Well, guess what? Who's laughing now? And the reason why I said that was a lot of reasons. Number one, it was the way how they lost in the wild card to the Rams. They generally do not lose at home, and they literally did not look good at all in that game. Then obviously Russell Wilson in the summertime coming out saying that, I don't want to be traded, but if you trade me, these are the 8 to 10 teams that I would like to be traded to. No point intended. Even though it wasn't him, it was his agent that came out with that, but still didn't say nothing to kind of shoot that down. You also had that. It was a lot of things. It felt like a mutual disconnect with him and Pete Carroll a little bit there in the organization. So I kind of looked at that, and I looked at the NFC West landscape, and I said, well, the Cardinals got significantly better, trying to make sure they win now while Kyler Murray is still cheap and on his rookie contract. I look at the Rams, and I seen what they did, getting a guy like Matthew Stafford to upgrade at quarterback and the moves that they made. And I also looked at the 49ers, who also had some moves that they made coming back fully healthy. And I looked at Seattle, I'm like, where is the improvement, right? Where is that upgrade? And that's why I kind of was able to time that they will be last in the division and will not make the playoffs. So based on what you saw thus far, especially last night with Russell Wilson, his play very inaccurate. I thought he missed some throws down the football field that were open. He did not target DK Metcalf at all in the first half, and I guess he got the word either from DK or from the team or whatever that he needs to get him more involved, and he tried to force it in the second half, and obviously with some bad throws there. Do you see a building situation with Seattle coming down the line with their play calling? It looks pretty stale. I don't really see no offensive identity. What are your thoughts on Seattle and what we could potentially see down the line?
Yeah, I think what we've seen with Russell Wilson's career there is that they've never really given him a whole lot of pieces around him. Lockett's a really good receiver, but I look at him more as a self-made player. Not someone when you drafted him, you expected him to be a featured receiver by any means. And then you have DK Metcalf, who obviously he's a freak of nature. He's a big dude. He's talented, but you need a little bit more. One of the things that I've always said Russell Wilson's never really had the luxury of working with, that a lot of the great quarterbacks over the years have had is just a stout tight end. A guy that can make a difference in the middle of the field. And he's never really had that. So he's always had these off play type of, plays that he runs. He's extending plays with his legs and he's improvising, but I've never really seen a full system put around him that could just utilize him dropping back and throwing the football, because he's got a great arm. He can make all the throws, and then obviously he can beat you with his legs. But I think far too many times the Seattle offense looked like it was, you watch Russell Wilson and see what he can do to pull a rabbit out the hat. And now it's caught up to them. It really has, and they're struggling. Their offense looks bad. It really does. They have talent. I mean, Alex Collins is not a bad running back. But at the end of the day, they just don't get him in space. They don't do the things that you need him to do to be effective. And yesterday, I was watching the game and, just being on the press box, even during pregame down on the field, it just didn't have that energy, for Seattle. And they came out trying to hype themselves up and all that stuff. But it's just not there. So I think that if you're Pete Carroll, listen, I don't know if they're going to get rid of Pete Carroll. I doubt that. But I do think you've got to make some wholesale changes. I know they kind of tried to change their offense from last year to open it up a little bit more, run some 4 wide receiver sets for Russell Wilson. But it's just not working. Maybe it's just because it's year one of this new offense, but they need more pieces to be more successful.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just accurately able to, pinpoint it. I even had Pete Carroll when I did my coaches list for this upcoming season. I had him at number 12. I didn't have him in the top 10. And a lot of people was looking at me funny. It was just something about the feeling going into this year and just being able to just, pinpoint the, possibly the end of an era, and Seattle was great for all this time. But I say one notable stat here is that since Russell Wilson has come back from that finger injury, they only scored 3 touchdowns on 30 drops. They got to do better than that. Yeah, and he came out last year and said that, not him, but his agent came out with some teams that he, would like to be traded to. So I don't see how that calms down after this year. So we'll have to see how that situation pans out. And we have to see how the Washington football team finish out their season. Can they turn it around in time to catch up to the Cowboys and actually take this NFC East? We'll have to see. Lake Lewis Jr., I know you got a big day today. I know you got some big things happening. If you want to, kind of tell the listeners what you got going on right now and where the evolution of Lake Lewis Jr. is going from here.
It's some good stuff going on. I can't divulge, but I can't say yet. I always wait till things is
in motion. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, man, I'm working, I'm grinding. I take my role very serious as far as, trying to help my own, trying to help anybody for that matter, but specifically, young aspiring Black media people. I didn't have a mentor in this game coming up. So now that I'm in a position where I can help, I always try to do that and be encouraging at the same time because we need that. So with all that being said, you can always check me out on social media, on Twitter, Lake Lewis, on Instagram, Facebook, Lake Lewis Jr. You can check us out at sportsjourney.com, where we cover not just the Washington football team, but most of the DC sports scene. We got some great coverage from some great reporters on sportsjourney.com. And, obviously you can check out my podcast, which new episode will be dropping later today on the After Practice podcast. So definitely appreciate that.
Definitely, y'all. So definitely tune in to his stuff. Tune in to Sports Journey. Tune in all over. And Can You Dig Sports here as well. And more content on the way. This is the one and only, The Real Lil with Lake Lewis Jr. And guess what? On to the next.